Chapter 1. Noise. For a long time, without realizing it, I lived in a constant hum. Oddly enough, it wasn't a sound. It was more like a constant mental noise where thoughts collided and echoed. The hum would begin the moment I woke up in the morning. Before I even opened my eyes, a voice inside me would say, "Will you be strong enough today? What if you make the same mistakes again? What if no one understands you?" I tried to silence those voices. I took refuge in music, mingled with crowds, and hid among the pages of books. But no matter what I did, the silence always remained a little far from me, because it wasn't the outside world I wanted to silence. The real storm was raging inside me. I paused for a moment and began to think, why is silence so difficult? Perhaps the silence frightened me, because when the silence fell, all the suppressed voices in my mind suddenly began to speak. Past mistakes, words I couldn't say, fears that had accumulated within me. Everything began to play simultaneously, like a forgotten orchestra. And in that moment, I realized what we thought was silence wasn't actually annihilation, but the most intense state of existence. Silence was a door beyond the senses. But as we stood before that door, we spoke constantly, as if we were trying to drown out the meaning of silence with our own voices. One day, I read something about quantum physics. It said, "The behavior of a particle depends on who is observing it." This sentence stuck with me. If even a particle behaves according to the observer's perception, perhaps my thoughts were also influenced by my own perspective. So, the more I focused on fear, the more intense it became. The more I focused on anxiety, the more intense it became. And this cycle created a universe within itself. Then I asked myself, what if I were the creator of my own universe, not the observer? If so, every vibration, every thought within me would radiate outward like a wave of energy, and the universe would respond to that vibration like an echo. At that moment, something changed. I realized the noise wasn't actually my enemy. It was merely a call, an echo, inviting me into that dark silence. Perhaps that noise was the voice of the universe trying to introduce me to myself. From that day on, I didn't run away. I remained silent. I simply listened. I didn't try to silence the voices in my mind. I tried to understand where they came from, and a strange thing happened. The more I listened, the more they disappeared. Like a child who silences when they feel understood. My mind slowly began to calm. As my thoughts faded, I became aware of the spaces between them. There was something in those spaces. Not a sound, not an image, but a presence I felt. Depth. It was as if the universe were breathing there. At that moment, I realized the universe wasn't there. It wasn't in the stars. It wasn't in the galaxies. The universe existed as a state of consciousness in the quietest corner of our minds. The more we silenced it, the further away we became. But when we listened, we began to hear the vibration of the universe within us. Perhaps what we perceived as noise was actually the universe's way of speaking to us. It said, "I'm here, but I can't hear you over your own voice. And now I know." True silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the vibration of everything in meaningful harmony. Fears, thoughts, memories. They were all different notes of the same orchestra. If we learn to listen, beneath that noise, we begin to hear the melody of the universe. And perhaps when the universe falls silent, we finally begin to listen to ourselves. Chapter 2. The Void. One morning, I tried not to feel anything. No joy, no sadness, no thought, just nothingness. I hung up the phone. I pulled down the curtains. And for the first time, I decided to listen not to the world, but to my own silence. At first, I thought it would be easy. But after just a few minutes, my mind immediately started to produce something. A voice whispered, "You're standing idle. Time is passing. You must do something." I had become so accustomed to fullness that the emptiness felt instantly dangerous. But then I stopped resisting. I just sat there, doing nothing. And that's when, in the midst of that silence, I realized for the first time how silent the universe could be. It was as if the whole world had held its breath for a moment. Not a single bird chirped outside, not a single thought inside. Even time seemed to stand still, and I was floating in an invisible void. This emptiness was frightening, yet familiar. It was as if the universe had returned to itself for a moment, listening to its own existence. And I was stuck in the midst of that introspective state. Perhaps I had been waiting a long time for the universe to return to me, but it turned out it had always been there. Only I couldn't hear it, lost in my own noise. Emptiness. A very simple word, yet it carries profound meaning. Most of us fear the void, because nothing is stable enough to hold on in the void. We begin to question ourselves, who we are, even why we live. But perhaps the true transformation begins right there, in nothingness, at that point where everything resets. In quantum theory, they say, the void isn't actually completely empty. It's filled with unseen energies. Particles arise from that invisible field and return to it. That morning, I realized the void within me operated in the same way. When my mind was quiet, that unseen field opened. And in that space, beyond thoughts, lay a silent yet vibrant consciousness. Perhaps the silence of the universe is terrifying for us, because in that silence, the boundaries of what we call I begin to dissolve. When we stop seeing ourselves as a body, an identity, a story, only existence remains. There is no past, no future. There is only the now, and that now expands like an infinite void. There was a strange peace in that silence. There was no joy, no fear, no expectation, just being. And that existence was like sharing the same breath with the entire universe. Perhaps the universe speaks to us most when we are silent, because then nothing intervenes. Nothingness, in fact, is the purest form of communication. The language of the universe is not words, but vibration. And only in silence can we hear this vibration. As we sat in the void, the concept of time slowly began to dissolve. Minutes, hours lost their meaning. A moment came. It was as if I ceased to be me and began to be everything. I existed on a bird's wing, on the surface of a stone, in the breath of a wind. And in that moment, I realized I'm not in a void. The void is within me. The silence of the universe isn't somewhere out there. It's hidden within us, in the deepest depths of our hearts. But hearing this silence sometimes requires losing everything we know. Because when you enter the void, the meaning of everything is rewritten. Fears dissolve. The past is erased. Identities dissolve. And all that remains is being. At the end of that day, I opened the curtains again. The sun poured into my room. Birds were chirping. Life continued where it left off. But something had changed. The sounds of the outside world could no longer disturb the silence within me, because I knew. That silence lived within me. And now, in the midst of everything, I carry that void. Even in a crowd, I know the silence is there. Because I learned, the void is not a place where nothing exists. On the contrary, it is the birthplace of all things, the heart of the universe. Perhaps when the universe falls silent, it is actually listening to its own heart. And when we become aware of the rhythm of that heart, for the first time, we truly become one with the universe, with the silence, and with ourselves. Chapter 3: The Observer. There's a rule in quantum physics. When you observe something, it no longer remains the same. Observation reduces possibilities to a single truth. In other words, a single look can change the behavior of the universe. This thought seemed abstract to me at first, but one day, when I looked within myself, I realized how real it was. I wasn't just a living being. I was the observer. And in that moment, I realized everything existed as I looked. When I looked at fear, fear intensified. When I looked at love, love expanded. Even my thoughts were shaped by the direction of my gaze. I asked myself, if I am the observer, then who is the observed? This question opened a silent door within me. The answer was beyond words, because at that moment, consciousness was looking at itself in its own mirror. Perhaps the whole secret of the universe lies there. We think we are observing the world, but in reality, the world is observing us. Every gaze creates an interaction. An invisible bond is established between the observer and the observed. And this bond is called awareness. The moment you notice something, you change it. But it also changes you. When you observe a cloud, even if the cloud's shape doesn't change, your inner thoughts change. When you look at a child smile, your energy shifts. Every observation creates an invisible interaction. This hidden dance of the quantum actually defines the nature of consciousness. The universe is not a fixed stage. It is a story constantly rewritten by our awareness. Every moment, every gaze, every thought shapes this story. I paused for a moment and looked within. Who am I? I asked. My mind immediately began to generate answers. I am a human being. I have a past. I have a step, a story. But when I looked a little deeper, I noticed a silence behind these descriptions. This silence, though it said nothing, knew everything. It was as if that silence were observing me, not me. That's when I realized it. I am the observer, but I am also the observed. It's like trying to touch your own reflection in a mirror. You reach out, but can never truly touch it, because it's your reflection and you are a part of it. Perhaps consciousness, in order to understand its own existence, had split into two. One is the observer, the other the observed. And these two dimensions experienced each other in an endless play. Then I realized that nothing existed outside of me. Everything was happening within my awareness. When I saw a tree, I wasn't just observing the tree. The tree, with its own existence, complemented my existence. We were both waves in the same sea of consciousness. This realization brought me a profound peace, because nothing seemed separate anymore. The observer and the observed were, in fact, the same consciousness, different vibrations of the same silence. In that moment, I felt the universe in a completely different way. I was no longer looking outward, but inward. And with each introspection, the external world changed. Because observation wasn't just seeing, observation was creating. Perhaps we are, unknowingly, the creative gazes of the universe. Every thought, every emotion, every moment of attention spreads like a tiny wave shaping reality. And the universe listens to these waves, responding to them. A moment came. In that profound silence where time, space, and body lost their meaning, only one awareness remained. The observer and the observed were one. I was the one being looked at, and I was the one being looked at. The universe was looking at itself through my eyes. In that moment, all sounds fell silent. All thoughts stopped, and I simply existed. In the silence of the universe, the observer's breath echoed, and perhaps in that moment, the universe truly saw itself for the first time. Chapter 4. Frequency. The universe is not essentially matter. While everything appears solid, tangible, and measurable, the essence of everything is actually energy, and the language of energy is frequency. Everything vibrates. Atoms, light, thoughts, even emotions. Every being in the universe carries its own unique vibrational melody. In the silence of a stone, in the light of a star, in the beating of a heart, there is an echo of the same rhythm. One day, I truly felt it. Suddenly, I found myself immersed in an invisible music. Not a note, not a melody could be heard, but a vibration emanated from everything. It was as if the universe were not speaking. It was simply vibrating. In that moment, I understood. Fear was a low vibration. It was like a closing door, a frequency that slowed the flow of energy, constricting existence. But compassion was the purest melody of the universe. It was an invisible thread that connected everything. When you truly understand a person, when you touch a living being, this frequency expands and spreads throughout the universe. At the quantum level, they say even a thought is a wave. That is, everything you think is sent out into the universe as a vibration. And the universe responds to this vibration. A thought, an intention, a feeling. They all spread like invisible waves, eventually finding a vibration that resembles their own. Then I realized my mind was a transmitter. My heart was a receiver. My mind sent the thought out into the universe, and my heart heard the echo of those vibrations. I asked myself, when will the frequencies disappear? If everything is trembling, what is that silence when the vibrations stop completely? Perhaps that moment was the moment when consciousness turned inward, the place where all vibrations are silenced, where all waves merge into the sea. This was the essence of silence, and there the observer and the observed, the transmitter and the receiver became one. The dance of frequencies was the universe's way of experiencing itself. Our thoughts guided this dance, and our emotions set its rhythm. When we were afraid, our frequency narrowed. When we felt compassion, it expanded. And this expansion resonated not only within us, but also with those around us. When you make someone smile, when you forgive someone, you aren't just sharing an emotion. You're changing the vibration of the universe. Because every heart, like a tiny transmitter, communicates with the universe. The compassion emanating from the heart can reach miles away. Even today, science says that the heart's electromagnetic field is thousands of times stronger than the brain's. This means the heart speaks the language of the universe, and this language is understood not through words, but through vibrations. The higher our frequencies, the more clearly and distinctly the world responds to us. The more we succumb to fear, anger, and despair, the more we become trapped in a lower frequency realm. But when awareness comes, energy rises, perception expands, and reality changes. A thought, an intention, a feeling, they are all messages sent to the universe. But the universe understands vibration, not words. That's why sometimes your wishes come true, because your heart has already spoken. Perhaps what we call prayer is more a state of frequency than words. The sincerity of a heart is the purest wave reaching the universe. And beyond all these vibrations, at some point, everything stops. Just as in the deepest depths of the ocean, there is no trace of waves. At that point, consciousness returns to its source. There is no frequency, no sound, no thought. There is only pure existence. That moment is when the universe is plunged into silence. But this silence is not an absence. On the contrary, it is the fullest state of existence. Because all frequencies, all energies are born from that silence and return there. Now I know. The universe speaks not with words, but with frequency. And when we remember that language, fear is replaced by compassion, chaos by harmony. Perhaps the true voice of the universe is heard when we are silent, because silence, the purest frequency. Chapter 5. Silence. And then, a moment came. There was no past, no future. That thin line where time stopped flowing, where not even thoughts echoed. As if the universe had retreated behind a curtain. As if a theater stage were closing, all sounds, all movements suddenly fell silent. Not a single sound remained in my ears, not a single thought in my mind. But at that very moment, I realized how deep, how intense, and how loud what we call silence can be. This silence wasn't like death. On the contrary, it was like birth. It was a moment when a being breathes again, when a consciousness returns to its roots. I heard nothing, but I felt everything. I saw nothing, but I knew everything. It was as if the entire universe had forgotten to breathe for a moment, and in that breath, I had touched the purest state of existence. In that moment, I realized that silence was not nothingness. Silence was existence itself. It wasn't the disappearance of something, but the return of everything to its essence. We humans are accustomed to listening to the sounds outside, the rustle of the wind, the roar of the crowd, the endless noise of the city. But we've never listened to the silence that echoes within us. Perhaps we're afraid of it, because no mask can hide in silence. There's only you and your truth. When the universe fell silent, something inside me began to speak. It wasn't a thought, nor a voice made of words. It was rather pure awareness. It was as if someone had finally whispered into my ear a truth I'd longed for. Perhaps that voice was God. Perhaps it was consciousness. Perhaps it was simply the echo of existence. But whatever it was, that voice told me, "Now you can listen." As these words echoed within me, everything fell into place. For only in silence can one truly learn to listen. When words fall silent, when thoughts retreat, when the mind casts aside the shadows of the past and does not cling to the anxieties of the future, that's when you begin to hear the voice of your own being. The silence of the universe isn't actually a test. It's an invitation. It doesn't ask you to do anything. It simply asks you to be. It doesn't ask you to fix things, but to understand. For the essence of everything is born from silence. The birth of a star begins with silence. The opening of a heart with compassion. The awakening of a soul to awareness. First, everything stops. It becomes silent. And after that silence, life flows again. That's why silence is not an absence, but a sign of a new beginning. For in silence, the universe is reordered. All energies find a new balance. Before a melody can be reborn, the notes need silence. So is the music of the universe. Sometimes it grows silent until you are ready to hear it with your heart. And in that silence, I realized I was never alone. The moment the universe quieted, I became one with it. I was the observer, and the universe the observed. But in that moment, the boundary between the two slowly dissolved. There was no separation anymore. There was neither me nor the universe. There was only wholeness, only pure existence. In that moment, I felt that silence was the heartbeat of the universe, that first pulse from which every vibration, every life, every thought is born. We cannot hear that pulse because we are always talking, always thinking, always full. But one day, if you can let go of all that fullness, if you can surrender yourself completely to emptiness, to complete silence, then you will feel it. The universe is listening to you, quietly, carefully, without judgment. And in that listening, you will learn to listen to the universe. There will be no need for words, explanations, or definitions. Because at that moment, you will know everything already has a meaning. You will simply become aware of that meaning. And perhaps all the answers to all the questions humanity has been searching for centuries, are hidden right there in the midst of that silence. Because sometimes the universe that says nothing is telling you everything. Chapter 6. Awakening. Silence. At first, I thought this was the end, but it turned out to be a door opening to a deeper perception. Not a closing, but an opening. It was the first step a consciousness took toward its own essence. At that moment, I realized the real noise wasn't in the outside world. It wasn't in people's conversations, the sounds of cities, the chaos of the world. The real noise was within us, in the thoughts we couldn't suppress, that inner voice that never stopped, those endless what-if questions. That was the real noise. When the universe fell silent, I was actually awakening, because the silence reborn consciousness. I wasn't trying to understand things. I was simply feeling them. And every sensation whispered a truth to me. The universe wasn't outside of me. I was the universe itself. As this awareness grew, matter slowly began to lose its meaning. Everything I thought was solid was turning into fluid energy. My thoughts, my emotions, even my body had become vibrating waves of a whole. And at the center of these waves was a single energy, me. At that moment, a thought crossed my mind. So waking up isn't about opening your eyes. Waking up is about seeing the truth behind your eyes. Because when consciousness awakens, nothing remains the same. Even time loses its meaning. Minutes disappear. Moments become eternity. I began to hear the language of the universe. It spoke not in words, but in frequencies. There was a rhythm in the wind, in the flow of water, even in the beating of my heart, the melody of a universal harmony. In that moment, I understood. I was not an observer of anything. I was one with the observed. When the veil between observer and observed is lifted, the purest form of existence emerges. There is no longer an I and an it. There is only one us. There is only one. Awakening is not a matter of knowledge. It is a state of awareness. It is difficult to describe in words because words are limited, but awakening is limitless. There comes a time when you can no longer learn anything because you know. Your consciousness knows, not your mind. Your heart knows. In this awareness, matter becomes an illusion. Energy speaks, and that energy is you. Everything resonates with your vibration. You feel you can change the world with a thought, because that thought is a wave of energy, and the universe hears that wave. In those moments, I began to understand how the universe works. Everything was an echo. Everything was an echo. Whatever you thought, you summoned. Whatever you felt, you created. This was the purest form of awakening, realizing that you are no longer a victim, but a creator. I was no longer an entity watching me. I was the consciousness that shaped what was being watched. And this consciousness was too vast to be contained within a body. This consciousness was hidden in the vibration of the stars, the rhythm of the seas, the silent fall of a leaf. And I felt one with everything. Awakening wasn't a destination. It was a journey. One day, you couldn't say, "I'm finished," because every realization opened a new door. Behind each door, a different depth awaited you. And with every step you took into that depth, you became a little simpler, a little quieter, a little more peaceful. Awakening was the loudest sound of peace, because in that moment, you no longer wanted anything. You knew everything was as it should be. You were no longer searching, because you felt you had found it. Your search was over, and all that remained was to exist. And in this state of existence, a power is born, a fearless, pure power. This isn't a power you possess. It's your very nature. When you're in harmony with the universe, you too become part of that grand rhythm. Then you don't rush anything, because you know everything comes at the right time. Not a second too soon, not a second too late. The universe's time is perfect. And perhaps what we call awakening is simply the realization of this truth. You never slept. You were merely dreaming. And now, you've awakened to the truth within that dream. Now you see, now you hear, and most importantly, now you feel. Because awakening is not the recall of knowledge, but the recall of existence. You were always the universe. Remembering this was enough. Chapter 7. Now. Now I know. I was born at the moment the universe fell silent. For silence is, in fact, the language of eternity. Every breath, every heartbeat is an echo of that silence. Once upon a time, I searched for meaning outside. Behind the stars, within the atoms, perhaps somewhere God hides. But now I understand that nothing is there. Everything was now. Everything was within me. Time wasn't a line. It was merely a moment in which consciousness breathed. The past, an echo. The future, a possibility. And the only place where all these possibilities converged was right now, in my heartbeat. When the universe fell silent, I learned to listen to myself. Because in that silence, all the answers were already there, waiting for me to hear. Now I understand. The way to speak to the universe isn't through more thinking, but through deeper feeling. When you remain silent, the walls of words crumble, and then energy speaks. Sometimes through a melody, sometimes through the sound of the wind, sometimes simply through the vibration of your heart. Perhaps you hear it too. That subtle vibration between yourself and the universe. Stop for a moment. Do nothing. Just listen. Listen not to yourself, but to existence. You will recognize that profound call within the silence. And when that moment arrives, the universe, for a moment, it will fall into silence again. Because you will vibrate at the same frequency. It will speak to you as if sharing a secret. I was not separate from you. In that moment, time dissolves. Matter loses its meaning, and only pure consciousness remains. Nothing is out there anymore. Everything is within you. And perhaps that's why all ancient teachings, all words of wisdom, all quests, all point to the same place. Now. Because now carries simultaneously the echo of the past, the possibility of the future, and the silence of eternity. So, the moment the universe falls silent, is actually the moment you are reborn. If you are listening to this right now, and time has stopped for a moment, if all sounds have disappeared, if you hear only your heartbeat, know that the universe is still silent, and it is listening to you. And remember, silence is not merely stopping, it is remembering your existence. Now, the universe is listening to you.